Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Federal lawmakers return to Washington this week. In the House, the spotlight will be on North Carolina Congressman Patrick McHenry. The Charlotte area Republican is the acting Speaker of the House. He'll oversee the chamber's election of a new Speaker now that Congressman Kevin McCarthy has been voted out. That process is expected to start this week with McHenry at the wheel. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran spoke with colleagues and friends of McHenry for insight into the interim Speaker, and he joins us now. Will, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Take me back to last week. There's buzz that Speaker Kevin McCarthy might be ousted, and then what? How did this become a North Carolina story?
Well, it really came as a surprise to a lot of people. I mean, it's no secret that Patrick McHenry has been kind of towards the upper levels of GOP leadership, but no one knew what was going to happen once the vote came down to oust Kevin McCarthy from office. I spoke with one of McHenry's good friends who's a Republican state lawmaker in the General Assembly, Jason Sain. They're actually each other's lawmakers. Sain represents McHenry in the state legislature. McHenry represents him in Congress. But he said he was watching this and was like, why is Patrick walking up to the dais right now? And then he realized, oh, wow, he just became the new Speaker of the House. And, then there's the clip that I think probably everyone's seen him, banging the gavel really hard, saying, all right, we need to get out of here and go figure out what's going to happen next. So, I mean, even the guy's close friends had no idea that he was kind of on the secret list that Kevin McCarthy had put together of who was going to succeed him if he should get ousted.
And that's part of the House rules, right? The outgoing Speaker creates a list and says, here's who runs the show if I have to vacate my position, right?
Yeah, and that came together, I guess, back in January when McCarthy was named Speaker for the first time.
And atop that list was Patrick McHenry. So at a high level, who is this guy? How did he get to where he is? And where does he sort of fit in to this sort of divided party right now?
So I would think it's fair to say he is not a household name here in North Carolina, but he is one of the most powerful people in Washington. He is the chairman of the House Finance Committee, which, deals with anything that is going to, any new laws that deal with banks, finance, insurance, things like that. So really influential for economic policy in this country and has kind of risen up in the ranks of GOP leadership. When Donald Trump was first elected, he was named to be the chief deputy whip. And essentially, the whip is in charge of making sure that you can get the votes that you want to have happen. So his job was, okay, we've got Trump, he's the president, let's make sure that he gets some good conservative wins in Congress in his first year or two. Obviously, that's when the big tax cut came through. That's when the Obamacare repeal happened, and McHenry was able to get the conservative win on that to repeal Obamacare. That passed the House, even though obviously it failed in the Senate.
Now, you report that McHenry had a transformation of sorts after his one stint in the North Carolina House. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, right now he is the acting Speaker because he was close allies, big member of leadership. And Kevin McCarthy was ousted by kind of this, rabble-rousing, hardline group on the far right. And McHenry has been open that in the past, he was really kind of more akin to the Matt Gaetzes and Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world than he is to, his now close ally, Kevin McCarthy. That started when he was in the state legislature back in 2003, kind of led a revolt against the GOP speaker at the time. Did not go well. It did not succeed, unlike this current vote, and he was retaliated against, lost his assistant in the legislature, had to, take all his phone calls, manage his own calendar, all of this, and got to Congress, still kind of with that same attitude of, I'm going to burn this place down. We're going to get results. And then he quickly realized, according to himself, that that's not really the way to get things done. You have to kind of work with the system, not against the system. And he's sort of just been that company man for the 19 years that he's been in Congress now, just done things the old-fashioned way, slowly risen up the ranks to the point where here he is now, acting Speaker of the House.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about how Congressman Patrick McHenry is viewed by colleagues and why he's brewing a beer with a Democrat. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about North Carolina Congressman Patrick McHenry. He's the new interim speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Will, your reporting painted a somewhat complex picture of Patrick McHenry. On the one hand, we see a guy who's an ally with a partisan like McCarthy, but then we heard from some Democrats who say that he can reach across the aisle.
Yeah, some Democrats from here in North Carolina, colleagues of his, were really almost complimentary of him, or were complimentary of him in recent days. Talking to them, said that they respect him. They have cordial relations, even if they don't agree on policy all of the time. They can get stuff done. Deborah Ross, Democrat who represents Raleigh, said that they worked together during COVID to get some tax things changed to just basically try and make people's lives easier, the sort of thing that wasn't political, just needed to happen. And, on the other hand, one of the first things that he did as speaker was kick Nancy Pelosi out of her kind of fancy office that she had in D.C. It's been a courtesy that's been extended to past speakers. Democrats thought it was a little petty, maybe payback for no Democrats voting to save Kevin McCarthy, but talked to some Republicans, who thought it was hilarious. So you have moments of bipartisanship, moments of partisanship, which is to be expected. But one common refrain I think that we've heard from Democrats is they say that he respects the institution. And what that could be is that he was actually the only Republican in North Carolina's House delegation who didn't vote back on January 6, 2021, to overturn the election results of some states that had voted for Biden. All of the other Republicans in our delegation voted to overturn at least one of those states. McHenry was the only one who basically acknowledged that Biden had won.
Now, you had the chance to sit down with Ross. She's the Wake County Democrat. She and McHenry have a special relationship. Tell us about that.
Yeah, on paper, they're really nothing alike. She's the former head of the ACLU. He was a, big college Republicans advocate, but they served in the state legislature at the same time. They were both freshman lawmakers back in 2003. So they would have gone through orientation together. They worked on some things in the state legislature together, and now here they are in Congress together, and they've known each other for 20 years. And like she told me, they can get along, they can work together, whether it's, signing a letter to try to, help some North Carolina company out, or whether it's working on tax issues, whatever it might be, they can do it. And right now they're actually brewing a beer together. There's this congressional contest that they're in as part of the Small Brewers Caucus.
So they're brewing a beer together now. That seems to be probably, I'm guessing, the least of their concerns at a time like this.
Yeah, it's certainly not the most important thing happening in Congress. But she told a funny story. Apparently, after one session ended, they got together on the floor and were kind of whispering to each other. And apparently, the CNN cameras zoomed in on them, and people were trying to figure out, what is the deal going down? What's happening? And she was like, no, we were just talking about what we should name our beer. But it does have some parallels, I think, with this broader discussion around the speakership and just power in D.C., kind of a metaphor almost. Representative Ross was telling me, they're not brewing a kind of beer that she really likes, but she was okay with that because she thinks it's got a better chance at winning. And, hey, this is politics. It's all about winning.
So in the days since Kevin McCarthy was ousted, a number of possible permanent replacements have been rumored. Who are they, and is McHenry in the mix?
So from what we can tell, McHenry doesn't seem to be in the mix right now. He declined to answer that question for us. The main frontrunners seem to be Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan from Louisiana and Ohio, respectively. There are some others in the mix too, but those two seem to kind of be the main candidates. People have even suggested, hey, should former President Donald Trump be the Speaker of the House? And I think that's kind of a fever dream of some. Who knows? Maybe Trump would be into it, but I'm not sure if that actually has a chance of happening. But the question is, okay, the McCarthy speakership just blew up because you have this faction on the right it's a pretty small group, but they clearly have enough power to oust a speaker if they want to. And so, who would even want to do this right now where you have to kind of appease each individual member of your party in order to hold on to power. And what Ross told me, she said, it doesn't look like McHenry's running now, but if a couple of these people do run their campaigns, they fail, they can't actually get the votes required to become speaker, who knows? Maybe McHenry could step in as sort of a consensus pick.
Now, given what Democrats told you about his willingness to reach across the aisle in a very divided Congress, and given that he is an ally of McCarthy, would he even stand a chance of succeeding in that role if, in a long shot bid, he actually becomes permanent speaker?
Yeah, that makes it really hard. Not only the fact that he's such a close McCarthy ally, he was working with McCarthy to make the deal with Democrats to avoid a government shutdown, which angered some Republicans. He, as I said, didn't vote against certifying all the votes on January 6th. He's done some things that have angered some of the more far right wing of the party. But, I think, asking Ross, okay, is there a chance that, Democrats could vote for him or for, anyone else who's, not along the lines of the kind of hardliners in the GOP? She said, well, Democrats want to vote for someone who's going to work with Democrats, and that, they would obviously prefer to have a Democratic speaker. But she said, it could be a Republican. It would sort of depend on, what we were going to get out of the deal, what sort of terms were in this. But, if the Republican Party shows that it's not able to elect a speaker that its own members can agree on, who knows? Maybe someone steps up and says, all right, well, I realize I'm not going to get unanimous support among the Republicans. I obviously won't get unanimous support among the Democrats either. But if I can get enough Democrats and have sort of this bipartisan coalition come together, maybe that's a formula for success.
Now, back to the most important part of our conversation, this beer. What happens next? You said they're in a competition together. When is that, and are you going to taste the beer?
So, yeah, the beer is not available yet. I asked. Actually, I met her at a bottle shop in downtown Raleigh. But the beer is still being brewed actually out in Asheville by Wicked Weed, great brewery. The contest is later this month. I think it's October 25th is when it's going to be judged. There's a few different teams in Congress who are competing. I think John Tester, the Montana senator, won it last year with his partner, whose name I forget at the moment. But McHenry and Ross think they've got a winning beer. It's a hazy IPA, obviously a classic beer for craft beer nerds out there.
Well, it's going to be an interesting week for political observers and an interesting month for beer lovers.
I do hope I get to try it. We'll see.
Well, if you do, I hope you'll bring some next time you're back. Will, thanks very much for joining us. That's WRAL state government reporter Will Doran. For his in-depth reporting on interim speaker Patrick McHenry, visit nccapital.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of the morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.